Right, so today I wanted to make a video on a topic that I think a lot of people may or may not know about. I would assume may not because it's so shocking. But um, long story short, the government of Canada is funding terrorism with taxpayer money. Now, they do this in multiple ways. The first one is the one I'll go over with. The other one is through foreign aid. It's kind of indirectly. Now, giving foreign aid to a country like Iran, or, I'm just using them as an example, um, the Saudis, any of that kind of stuff, it's going to go towards maybe not directly funding terrorism, but indirectly funding terrorism. Buying oil from the Middle East, whether it's from the Saudis or whatever, that is also indirectly funding terrorism. Obviously using taxpayer money, and that's what we're doing. The other thing to go over here is that if you don't follow the Quiggin report, which is a good podcast that everyone should go listen to. It's run by Tom Quiggin. He's a former he worked for CSIS, he worked for the military, he worked for the RCMP. He's one of the foremost military intelligence and foreign policy experts, at least as Canadians go. And he runs his own podcast that's very good. So if you want to go listen to it, which I do suggest you do, it's just search the Quiggin Report on any wherever you listen to your podcast. It should come up. It's very good. But long story short, they go over here that the government of Canada funds Islamic Relief Canada, which obviously gives money to Islamic Relief Worldwide, which gives money to Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. That's basically, in a nutshell, how the government of Canada funds terrorism. Now, it's not directly; they're not handing money directly to the terrorists, but they know the money's ending up in terrorist hands, which I would say is it's still funding terrorism. Now that these charts over here go over exactly what's going on here, so you can check that out if you want. Um, but basically, you can see here $23 million from the M103 bill ended up there. Um, $1.5 million from this program, questionable amount of money here, $3 million from this fund. So it's not a ton of money, but it's still money. And like I say too, that's not even counting the foreign aid and the money we're buying with a lot of Eastern Canada buys oil from the Middle East. They don't buy from Alberta for some crazy reason, which is another video in and of itself. But like I say, the money's ending up in terrorist hands, and the the one other point I wanted to bring up here is that we talk a lot about the political divide nowadays, and I always bring this up, and why it's so bad and all this kind of stuff, and we can't even agree that giving money to money ended up taxpayer money that ends up funding terrorism is a bad thing. Whenever if you were to bring this up, the liberals, Justin Trudeau, all these kind of people, they'd call you a racist. They wouldn't agree with you. And if we can't even agree that taxpayer money that clearly and obviously ends up funding terrorism isn't a good thing, we should figure out a way to stop, funding that, then I don't understand how we're going to agree on anything. And I think that's one of the big things is that we can't even agree on basic stuff that anyone with common sense should be able to agree on. Like there's issues that I think are rather debatable, or at least are going to need to be debatable. But if we can't even agree on stuff like this, we're never going to agree on the nuanced stuff. And the problem is that the left is a lot more willing to use smear tactics, violence, the threat of violence to get their way when it comes to politics, basically. And the reason why one of the reasons why there's this big divide is that people who are in the middle, who are able to sway the public belief in whatever we're talking about, I don't know what it would be, but whatever we're talking about, the people that have the ability to sway the public's perception, whether it's this issue, whether it's free speech, whether it's gun rights, any of this kind of stuff, whether it's you name the issue, those kind of people are scared to voice their opinion because they know that if they voice their opinion and it makes the left, especially the far left, outraged, well then they're gonna have threats. They may be physically attacked. You see what's going on with Antifa and all this kind of stuff, and that kind of stuff. Yes, it exists on the right, but it's not nearly to the same extent. And most moderates will even tell you this kind of stuff. You have a lot of even Democrats who admit this kind of stuff, and it's just not the same. And like I say too, the political divide is it's like I've said with the chart that I showed the video on, people like Tim Pool always talk about it, that if you look at politics over the last, handful of years, 10 years or so, I think it goes back, the left has gone way to the left, like way to the left. And the right has actually moved slightly to the left. Like the right's almost exactly where they were. And you have all these people that say, oh, both sides are equally responsible and both sides have gone off the deep end. That's just not true. It's not true. And I'm not so I didn't even vote conservative last election. And a lot of people say, oh, you're just a partisan conservative. It's not true. I voted PPC. So I don't understand it. And the problem is that you have these people in the middle, and why I stress it so much is that, they have the ability to sway the public's perception on this kind of stuff. And the problem is that by staying silent, you side with whatever side is willing to use more violence, willing to use more of the threat of violence to get their way. So it's something that bothers them too. You'll accuse them of being on the left, and they'll deny it. Oh, no, 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 I'm in the middle. But like I say, refusing to take a position on something, you're just by default siding with whatever side is willing to use more violence or the threat of violence to get their way, which is why I can't stand, like, if you don't want to be political, don't be political. But the problem is that people they'll say, oh, I'm, apolitical, I'm not that into this kind of stuff or into politics and that kind of stuff, but yet they'll have very, very strong opinions on maybe not every topic, but usually there's certain topics that they have like very strong opinions on or very strong beliefs. And you're like, well, I think to myself, well, I thought you weren't, you just got done telling me, or, I've heard you say before, oh, I'm not that into politics. Well, it's just something that really bothers me, kind of a tangent, but yeah, the whole point being is that, if we can't agree that, taxpayer money that and that ends up funding terrorism is a bad thing, and we should, try and reduce it to as much as we can, hopefully the whole way, then there's no way we're going to agree on any more, intense issues, because there's a lot of issues that I don't think the left and the right are ever going to agree on or ever even come close to agreeing on. But stuff like this is something that we should easily be able to agree on. And for a lot of people wondering, well, why does the left, why are they okay with it? Why do they want to do this kind of stuff? Well, because they perceive foreign aid as, well, if you don't want foreign aid, it's because you hate the poor. Even though that, the studies show that foreign aid doesn't actually improve things all that much. It destroys local economies. It's free money doesn't help the situation. It helps it in the short run, but it doesn't work in the long run. They buy oil from the Middle East because they're virtue signaling and they're massive hypocrites. Because if they actually cared about the environment, you still have to use a certain amount of oil. Even if you went all green, you still have to use a certain amount of oil. You'd buy from your fellow Canadians. That's just absolutely insane. Like that's the one I don't like to assign negatives to people, but that's one issue that people like. I'm not gonna give in on that one. That one you're crazy if you're still there. And the stuff like this is that it's a charity. It's a Islamic Relief Canada is a charity. So if you're against that, well then, oh, it's because you hate Muslims, you're racist, and that's kind of their reasons for it. And they don't put a lot of thought into it, because if you can have this button that you can push that, oh, if you disagree with me, you're racist, and like, well, if you can have that, like, people on the left think that, the minute you throw out the R word or the bigoted word or any of these kind of words, is that it means you automatically win the argument by default, or the debate by default. So that's why they're so terrible at debating. That's why the right is so good at debating, because they don't have this, you're a racist, you're a sexist, and like, you automatically won the debate kind of throwing something out. The right doesn't have that. So that's why they're better at this kind of stuff. But anyway, I'll leave the video there. If you like to, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.